We continue this morning in the second week of our season of creation, reading both the scripture of our ancient texts and that of the world God created. And so today we read mountains.
Our first scripture reading is Psalm 90, verses 1 and 2. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. And the next is Isaiah 49, verse 13. Sing for joy, O heavens, and exalt, O earth. Bring forth, O mountains, into singing. For the Lord has comforted his people and will have compassion on his suffering ones. And Matthew 14, verse 23. And after Jesus had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. And a reading from Daniel Cooperwriter from Speak to the Earth, and It Will Teach You. When we read the Bible from the perspective of mountains, mountains are often celebrated as the beautiful dwelling place of the divine and as awesome marvels of creation. However, we also find moments when the difficulty and challenge of mountains reveals them as sites of physical and spiritual testing, temptation, and confrontation. Mountains in the Bible can be both occasions for theophany and the intimate knowing of God, as well as occasions that reveal the immense gulf or gap in our knowledge of God. Here ends our readings. May God bless our receiving, our understanding, and our living.
Well, there's been a lot of interesting music today. The last hymn that we sang, the one that we just sang, is an old hymn. I know it's old-fashioned, right? But it mixes into the blend of music that you like to provide here. I sing the mighty power of God that made the mountains rise. Now, it might feel old-fashioned, although those of us who know it think it feels contemporary in a way. It was written in 1715, so yes, it's old. But ironically, Isaac Watts, the great hymn writer who wrote hundreds of hymns, put this into a hymnal called Divine and Moral Songs for Children. Around that time, the only songs that people were singing were words from the Psalms, and they were being chanted. And he said, nobody understands that language from the Bible. Let's put this in a language that even children can understand. And that's how we get that hymn. The point is clear. I sing the mighty power of God that made the mountains rise. I sing the mighty power of God, the goodness of God that filled our earth with food, God's involvement in all of our lives. Emily always has a way of getting the sermon done before the sermon. So I don't have to do those things, talk about plates or anything like that when we talk about mountains today. But I can ask how many of you, now we've all seen pictures of mountains, how many of you have been in front of a mountain? How many have driven in a mountain? How many have ridden bikes in a mountain? How many have hiked? How many have gone to a peak? Well, we have a lot of mountaineers here, a lot of mountain experience. You lived in Aspen. Well, there you go. There's a lot of sermons. We could just be silent as in a Quaker service today and all meditate about our experiences with mountains. Mountains, obviously, as we sung, remind us of the creative power of God and of our own smallness in their presence. The French priest and anthropologist Pierre Teilhard de Chardin used to like to talk about the immensity of creation. Immense things like mountains, right? But think about galaxies and space, the whole immensity and largeness of creation, and the infinitesimally small, right? Subatomic levels, particles. And we as human beings are somewhere in the middle of all of that, the immensity of creation and the infinitesimal. It reminds us of sprained ankles, doesn't it? That rocks in the way. The Bible connects, this is important, the Bible connects mountains with God, not as God, but as God's dwelling place. Moses received the commandments on the mountain. There's even a story in the book of Exodus, chapter 24, where Moses and 70 elders go up onto the mountain. They see God. They have a feast with God. They eat and drink with God. They're at God's house, in a way. And they give thanks with God, a big covenant party. Elijah, the prophet, fled to the mountains when King Ahab and Queen Jezebel wanted to kill him. And it was there where angels ministered unto Elijah. For Jesus, there's a story of the transfiguration on the mountain when Moses and Elijah appear. They talk with Jesus, and then God's voice comes clear, saying, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." The whole authority of the law, represented by Moses, and the prophets, represented by Elijah, are conferred upon Jesus in that moment. Jesus chose a high place above the Lake of Galilee for his Sermon on the Mount. And many times Jesus would go into the mountain to pray. There's a particularly moving story in the gospel when John the Baptist is unexpectedly, dramatically, and suddenly executed by Herod. Jesus hears the news. He has some people to attend to, as usual, with some healing and some feeding. But as soon as he attends to that, he goes off into the mountain to mourn, to grieve, to seek comfort, to seek guidance as he's heard of this terrible news. As in the Bible stories, mountains with their green hillsides, and we sang about the meadows, the choir sang about the meadows, their green hillsides and forests, dramatic peaks, craggy surfaces, snowy tops, high elevations, covered with clouds and lightning and fire sometimes, remind us of the power of God, at once power, and also of our fragile mortality as humans. My own reminder came about many years ago when I was working as a conference youth ministry coordinator in Northern California and Nevada with the United Methodist Church. And that whole region was divided into 7 subregions, and I traveled through that whole area going to youth events. And it was an April 1st. What is that? An April Fool's Day. I was in Stockton doing a youth event there all day, and then I had to leave there around 4 o'clock or so to go to Fallon, Nevada, in the middle of the Nevada desert for a youth event the next day on Sunday. My plan was get to Sacramento around 6 o'clock, Interstate 80, get you to Reno in about 2 hours. I'd find a room and get a nice meal, and then drive into Fallon the next morning for church and the youth event. Got out of Sacramento, started making the drive through the foothills into the Sierra Nevada mountains, and that happened. It started to snow, and it snowed heavily. We see the weather constantly on our phones now, right? I didn't pay attention to the weather. I think other people may have because there was nobody else on the road. So I'm driving through this snowstorm. There's a whole lot more light in this picture than there was. All I had were the light of my headlights on the snow on the road and the red tail lights of a pickup that was ahead of me. Thank goodness for that, until he pulled off at one of the exits and went on his way. So it was just me and the snow. Happily, at one point, there were flares in the road. I thought, what are the flares about? Is there an accident ahead? No, it was men in yellow slickers pulling over, well, my vehicle, because there were no others, offering to put chains on the car. Not really offering, was required. If you're going to go any further, you need the chains. So they put those on. So for the rest of the journey, they were loose, and I hit them. They hit the wheel well, whap, 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 the entire trip. I think I'm partly deaf from this trip. Snow beating on the windshield. I get to a sign that says Donner's Pass, where the Donner Party in 1846 was snowed in and bad things happened. And all of a sudden, a song came on the radio. I turned on the radio to have a companion. And what do you think the song was? By a band named Kansas. All we are is dust in the wind. Dust in the wind. It took me 6 hours to get to Reno, but I made it safely. And then there were no rooms available in all of Reno. I went to Carson City, no rooms available there, so I drove into the desert into Fallon, which is a naval air base in the middle of nowhere, and got a room at 3 in the morning. And the youth event went on as planned. Psalm 103, God knows our frame. You can read that. Let's read it together. God knows our frame. God remembers that we are dust. Our days are like grass. We flourish like a flower of the field. The wind passes over it and it is gone. But the steadfast love of the Lord is from everlasting to everlasting upon those who keep covenant and remember to do the commandments. Mountains remind us of the awesome power of the Creator God, and they put us in our place, our smallness in relationship to the immensity of all of creation. There are lessons we can take as we measure that. Emily pointed to that, alluded to it already. Mountains represent eternity, taking millions of years to form. The outer crust of mountains is continually adjusting to changes that are happening inside of the mountain. And the mountains go through periods of building and growing, and then they rest a while in relative calm. Mountains can affect the world by blocking winds, warm winds or cold winds. In the Bible, we read how the hills and the mountains, the high places, provided refuge for those who were fleeing from threats on the plains and in the valleys. Mountains give streams their greater force. They sustain green pastures. They provide us with a sense of mystery. With their eloquent silence, they whisper to us about life and its meaning. This all speaks to the power and wisdom of God, the Creator, and we might seem small in the presence of all of this, but here's the thing. We humans can not only learn from mountains, but we can be like them. Psalm 30, verse 7, God has established me as a strong mountain. How so, we might ask? Well, there's the answer. You can read it for yourselves. Aren't we continually building and growing? Aren't we changing on the outside as well as changing on the inside? Don't we go through major changes sometimes, and at other times we live in relative calm? We affect the world around us. We can be a shield for friends and family facing storms of their own. We can be a sanctuary and place of support for those, and beauty for those in need. And in our very lives and in our living, can we not reflect, like the mountains, God's eternity, God's awesome power, God's comforting strength, God's goodness, God's liberating and redeeming concern? How to become like a mountain? Well, I like this word saturated. Be saturated with the heavens in relationship with the mysteries and powers of the universe. How do we get saturated with that? Well, by praying, by singing, meditation, anything that gets you into God's presence and into an awareness that you have this relationship with God. Become saturated like with the heavens in relationship with the powers of the universe. And be aware of the continual shifting and changing that's going on in your life, and embrace that as part of natural process. To be rooted in the earth of our lives like a mountain, nature itself, and the biblical traditions in which we live and move and have our being. We sing the mighty power of God that made the mountains rise. And as Isaiah reminds us that the mountains sing back. Break forth, O mountains, into singing, for God has comforted the people and will have compassion upon the afflicted. May you be a sign of God's love and power all your days, inspired by mountains and aspiring to be like them.
Friends, let us turn to the work of the church together. First, a quick note that the Celebration Singers will be singing again at the end of this month on October 29th. The Celebration Singers is our choir for all people and people who can't commit to singing on a regular basis with the choir. You're welcome to join in this occasional choir. And there will be a rehearsal after worship today and next week to prepare for October 29th. If you would like to join that, students K through 12 and all adults are welcome, whether you've sang in the choir or not before. A reminder, our middle schoolers are walking with the crop walk today after worship at First Cong in Madison. If you would like to contribute, you can find their information on the crop walk website to make a donation, but be with them in prayers for them as they walk this afternoon to raise money to fight hunger. We need some volunteers this Friday to help out Pope Farm Elementary. Our partner right across the street is hosting their trunk or treat. If you remember, we are not doing trunk or treat this year. For the first time in a long time, we were trendsetters, right? Trunk or treat was really big here many years ago, and now everybody does it. And so we are throwing our support behind Pope Farm Elementary and their PTO's trunk or treat. And we need some help. I'm going to be there and a couple others serving apple cider to their over 400 kids who show up for trunk or treat. So if you can come and help out and show a loving hand to our neighbors from 5:30 to 7:30 or even part of that on Friday, let me know, or you can let Laura Crow know that you can be there. And instead of trunk or treat this year, we'll be having a Halloween movie on October 22nd. So that's next Sunday afternoon, 4 p.m. We will be showing a movie here in the sanctuary. It's going to be really great. Snacks will be provided. Come in costume if you feel so moved, or in festive Halloween gear. We'd love to have you. And then finally, an update on our stewardship campaign. So a reminder that your pledges for 2024 budget are due November 12th. So we're still a month out, and have invited members of each of our boards to come and speak to you about the reasons that they give and what inspires them to give, and the next faithful step that they are excited about the work of their boards and MCC. So today we have Lisa Opitz to come and speak on behalf of the Board of Finance. Good morning.
Because I believe in God and I believe in this church. I give because I serve on the Board of Finance, and I understand that it's the contributions that come from all of us that allow us to have incredible staff members, to have this building for worship and fellowship, and to make substantial donations to organizations that do vital mission work within our community and around the world. I give because I'm so grateful for all the blessings I've enjoyed in my life, and I want to do something to share those blessings with others. I give because there's so much pain and suffering in the world. Terrorism, wars, earthquakes, floods, so many people who are lacking food, water, shelter, and safety. It's hard for us to even begin to comprehend the suffering. Why do I serve? I serve because I'm a strong believer that many hands make light work. If we all do a little bit to help, together we can accomplish so much. I serve because it reminds me to turn the focus to others and not get too bogged down in the details of my own life. I serve because it's a great way to form deeper connections with others in the church and in the community. We have so many fantastic people in this church, and I feel that I've learned how to be a more generous, faithful, and kind person from all of them. And I serve because I believe that even in small and ordinary human interactions, we have the opportunity to touch someone's life in ways that we don't realize. So what is the next faithful step for the Board of Finance? On the Board of Finance, we do a lot of mundane work that allows the extraordinary work to happen. So we're working on a 2024 budget that will allow MCC to fund an exciting new ministry. We are planning out the long-term maintenance that needs to be done on our building so that it can continue to be a welcoming space for worship, fellowship, and neighborhood events, and so that MCC can truly become an integral part of both our neighborhood and the larger community. We're hiring an external bookkeeper to keep up with our growing needs and to hopefully free up our office manager to focus more of her time on important communication tasks. And we're going to reevaluate MCC's accounting software in the coming year and compare it to other programs to see if it's still the best tool for us. Pastor Zana and the church staff, along with so many talented and passionate church members, are always thinking of new possibilities for MCC, so I'm truly looking forward to whatever may come next. As you consider your pledge for next year and the ways in which you can contribute your time and efforts to MCC, I hope that you will take some time to reflect on what giving and serving really mean to you. Please consider increasing your pledge by 5% or more if you're able, and whatever amount you give, I hope that you can give from an open and grateful heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Lisa left out the most important thing and exciting thing that the Board of Finance is doing, and that's getting me Christmas lights on this building. Right, yeah, that deserves an applause. It gets really dark out here at like 4:30 all winter, and we need to be a part of the neighborhood and festive, so. So please, and then the next slide will give us an update on where we are in the pledge campaign. We've had 35 households pledge and totaling 38.7% of our goal, which is really great because we are still a month out from when those pledges are due. You can find all the information on the church website under the membership tab. Find the stewardship campaign. So thank you. And thank you to everybody who contributes financially to the work that MCC does. You can give your 2023 pledge offerings or any other gifts at middletonucc.org, or there are boxes right outside the door as you leave. With that, let us stand and sing our closing song. Now, my friends, I invite you to turn toward these doors. I remind you are not an exit, but an entrance into a week of service.